Hello and welcome to this edition of the Topical Discussion. This morning we'll be discussing trade and politics as the country gears up to the 2026 election. And the big focus is on what's happening at the borders. How is trade being affected, or rather being shaped as one of the key issues in the political campaigns, especially as the presidential candidates traverse the country, combing every corner of the country for elections, for votes. Well, joining me this morning is Mr. Makoha Mugeni Samuel, the PFF Secretary for Foreign Affairs, and a candidate in the Busia municipality race. Good to have you and a very good morning.
Thank you, Simon, and a very good morning to the viewers.
Is there any reason for the country to believe that border trade should be one of the issues to be focused on during this period, the frenzy of the campaigns?
Thank you, Simon. Border trade is a very, very critical aspect of our economy. Even more critical for the residents of the border towns. I come from Busia municipality, the biggest trading center, border town in Uganda. As we speak now, business has collapsed in Busia town, and not only Busia, but also other border towns along the Kenyan-Ugandan border. Why has it collapsed? Because we have opened up our borders so much that the goods that used to be supplied from the rest of the country to Busia, from where the Kenyans would buy and take to Kenya, they are now being sourced directly by the Kenyans in the gardens. In other words, we have allowed Kenyans to come and engage in petty trade of buying produce from the gardens and therefore taking the people of Busia, who were majorly, we could say, middlemen, buying from the interior to the border, and then people from Tanzania, from Somalia, from Kenya, buying at the border.
Is it by policy or by default?
I think it's both. To the contrary, we Ugandans who are at the border are unable to go to Kenya, inside Kenya, to buy the products for which they have an advantage against us from their gardens, or even to supply the cereals that we buy from Uganda into the Kenyan market. There is what we would call a very strong non-tariff barrier regime in Kenya. When we would take maize to Kenya as Ugandans, you would find it so hard for the Kenyans to buy it. The Kenyan National Produce and Cereal Board would only buy maize from their fellow Kenyans. So those Kenyans would come to the border in Busia, buy the maize, and take it to Kenya. We Ugandans would not be allowed to take that maize directly into Kenya. To the contrary, Kenyans are allowed a free way across Uganda to buy whatever they need and take it across. I'll give you another example. The Ugandans that export pineapples into Kenya, you can do whatever you want with your pineapples from the border up to the markets in Kenya. But you are not allowed to sell even a single pineapple in Kenya. We have what they call, for example, in Nairobi, the Mariakiti Pineapple Society. They would not allow any foreigner to sell or offload a single pineapple from their truck unless they have been given authority over that product. So, what?
No, but I thought there is a free trade agreement amongst countries within the East African community.
So yes, there is supposed to be a free trade agreement, but that is not working. And that is why governments like those in Tanzania, for example, they have issued a law, they have passed a law that says that if you're a foreigner and you want to bring your products, agricultural especially, into Tanzania, bring them up to the border so that Tanzanians can pick from the border and take into the interior. And they say that if you want to buy maize, for example, from Tanzania, wait for the maize at the border, let the Tanzanians bring it to the border so that you can buy it from there.
While on the contrary, Uganda is open.
While on the contrary, we are too open and we are therefore collapsing our traders. We are unable to compete in the trade scene across the region. The people of Busia, therefore, are demanding a government intervention. Government intervention in the sense that they need protection. And worse still, this intrusion of the Kenyans came at a time when traders in Busia had acquired loans, had mortgaged their buildings to get resources and invest into business.
I get a sense that these lamentations arise from government's strict stance against Magendo, the Magendo culture that was typical of Busia.
There has never been a Magendo about cereals, for example.
But the culture has always been Magendo.
And by the way, people of Busia are moving away from Magendo into formal trade. You could call it petty trade, but they have moved away from smuggling. They pay tax. Good enough is that many of the products, agricultural products, that are traded across the border do not attract tax. So what we want in Busia is protection from unfair competition from our biggest neighbor, and that is Kenya. Unfair in such a sense that there are extreme non-tariff barriers on the Kenyan side. Ugandan traders who own trucks are unable to operate freely in Kenya. While in Uganda, if you go to Kisenyi here, you will find Kenyan trucks doing petty trade across Uganda, transporting goods from Gulu to Lira, from Lira to Soroti, from Soroti to Mbale, while we have our own truckers here. The challenge is that Kenyan traders in their country are able to access cheaper and long-term credit to buy trucks. Our truckers here...
someone would say that you're exaggerating the crisis at the borders.
You have to be in Busia to understand the situation in which people are. People in Busia, if you count 1, 2, 3, 4 houses, the fourth one is bank property. Banks are attaching properties in Busia because business has collapsed and therefore people are unable to meet their loan obligations. You have to look at the situation, domestic situations. Parents have abandoned families. Mothers that used to, operate restaurants. Those that used to feed 50 people are now feeding 10. The nightlife in Busia has collapsed. Areas that used to operate 24 hours are now operating up to 8 p.m. and they have closed. Why? Because trade has collapsed, and that has been brought about.
But for a while, Busia has had representation. Busia has been one of the focuses for the revenue collection. How come these matters are glossed over?
Yes, we've had the representation, but you may want to believe that each representation has its role. We have had the ongoing representation, and they have played their role. We believe that now is the time to engage another gear to protect the economic interests of our people. You've mentioned the issue of the border. Previously, there used to be a lot of customs clearing agents in Busia. Ever since the services were shifted from Busia and taken directly to Nakawa, the clearing and forwarding industry in Busia has collapsed. There is no benefit whatsoever we get from our strategic location at the border based on clearing and forwarding of goods and services, and there is no strategic advantage we are now getting in the exchange of goods and services by way of cross-border trade.
You are depicting Busia as now a ghost city, once a glorious place, now a ghost place of its own.
And you are right, Busia was very glorious. Busia people had resources, and that permeated into the social sector, the sports sector. Busia was a sports powerhouse. We had boxers, we had football clubs. Life was going on. Parents were educating their children in some of the most expensive schools in this country. Today, it's very hard to find a child from Busia studying in the top schools in this country because the economy has collapsed. Parents are unable to afford high school fees.
Yeah, but Busia traditionally thrived on informality.
We have moved, like I said.
Informality.
And that informality actually stopped in the early 2000s when there was a vicious crackdown on smuggling. There were killings nearly on a daily basis of smugglers. And therefore, people moved from that sector of trade and now moved into the formal sector. What we are saying is that we do not want to engage in smuggling. What we demand government is protection from unfair business practices.